On the Editing Podcast, we've learned how to edit a Ryan Trahan vlog,
I conducted a Harmon Circle with the Penny series,
how to edit a Michelle Khare challenge video,
Retention has been the worst thing to come through our edit suite.
and with Zack Arnold, how to edit a Netflix show.
We manipulate the way that people think and the way that people feel.
But today, the tables turn. Quite literally. Instead of being on the host side of the table, Hayden is now on the guest side of the table.
How much are you asking me to stay compared to begging me to stay? Organically and naturally, you genuinely develop creative muscle memory. How does your body and heart feel when you see that cut? Once you hit those points, your edit becomes beautifully obvious.
My name is Ashley. Jordan is out sick, and it is my pleasure to interview Hayden about all things editing, YouTube, and filmmaking. Don't be nervous. I can already tell you're nervous.
Normally, I'm meant to be the one doing the interviewing, and now I'm the one being the guest. It's like, I don't know. I didn't expect it to happen so soon, and I'm just like, I'm nervous.
I think if I could give one piece of advice to any editor that comes on this podcast is that it is completely nervous, or it's...
Are you sure you're not nervous?
I think the title of this video was going to be How to Edit Like Hayden-Hillier-Smith. Let's establish a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
What are the hallmarks of YouTube's editing style? And what are the hallmarks of Hayden's editing style?
The hallmarks of the YouTube style, or at least where the hallmarks of a YouTube style is going into, is efficiency. Creators are really starting to wise up that the moment they click on that video, they're already looking for the first reason to click off, which means that we have to, even though I don't like the word, optimize the content that we create to ensure that there is many reasons as to why they should not click off and ensure they watch throughout the whole video. That realization, that epiphany for many creators in the past couple of years has been transcended it into this whole new realm of creativity and a whole new realm of filmmaking styles. And one of the biggest words that I've noticed a lot of it is, it's not optimization, it's efficiency. How efficient is the content to ensure that while I'm having the best experience that I can while I am watching this video, and ensuring that I don't want to click off.
I'm so curious about this word efficient. Does that mean fast? Does that mean...
I would define it as the opposite of friction. I think fast editing is the common misconception for efficiency. Yes, you could deliver the content to be extremely fast and try and get to the ending as soon as possible. But by doing that, you create a huge risk for me to actually not be able to enjoy those emotional moments or those specific story beats that probably do need that room to breathe a little bit more for them to be abundantly clear. So efficiency for me is your story consistently clear? Is the content you're presenting easy for me to engage in? Are you respecting me as an audience? Efficiency also goes towards how much are you asking me to stay compared to begging me to stay? And so the efficiency is basically, is this an easy watch for me?
One of the things that sticks out to me about YouTube in particular compared to maybe film and TV is that there is an awareness that there is an editor. You can almost make jokes in the editing. You can talk to your editor. The editor can like film themselves working on the timeline for a joke. When did we all realize there is an editor and that we should include that kind of meta style?
In film and TV, throughout the history, editors have been considered the silent narrator. And so as in they are able to narrate the film for you, but they never actually say a word. I've always liked that, but it kind of then makes them invisible. And then film suddenly they became a lot more accessible. And then suddenly us as youths were aware of how a film was made. And so the illusion was broken. And when we realized that, we went, oh, some fun could be had here. We then started to challenge that style and, hey, actually, yeah, this is clearly being edited by someone. There is clearly an extra perspective that they are giving when making and presenting this content towards you. There has been many moments where some of the people I've worked with have made a joke and it just zooms out to the editing timeline with me and Mike giving a thumbs up to them as well. And there's even moments where, let's just say, there could be something very undramatic, but then the editor can then make it the most overly melodramatic thing possible. And so creating that contrast, really telling the audience, hey guys, this is clearly being edited, but then that then also then becomes the joke. And that is genuinely because, as I said, I'm still a youth, I hope, we became abundantly aware of how film was made.
Yeah.
And so we embraced it. And we get to then play with that illusion once it was broken.
Truly, it's one of my favorite things as a viewer of YouTube to cut to the editor cutting. It's such a deliciously meta moments. And that just makes me think of so many things. Like there's this Lil Nas X music video, this meta editing style that's so in the vein of YouTube. Everything is like stock footage with the watermark still on it. Yeah. If I were to show someone that didn't know what YouTube was, like kind of the style of YouTube, I think I might show them Lil Nas X. Would there be a video that you would show them that would be like, hey, I know you've never seen YouTube before, but if you watch this one video, this encapsulates the style.
If I'm honest, I still have a bit of a soft spot of this classic creator, Tom Scar. He had a really, really fascinating style, especially in the editing of like, hey, this is clearly a sketch that is hosted on YouTube. That means we can do whatever the hell we want with it. It made it big, it made it loud, it had incredibly efficient pacing and delivery as well.
It's a baby with a gun, over. What? It's a baby with a gun! Over! I will give you 45 pounds for that gun. Or you could just have it. This is a mugging now.
I still have a soft spot for those types of content. It's not quite the popular content today, but I would still go back and introduce someone to YouTube. That is the entry point.
I think it's so interesting that you went with a more obscure creator, a creator that was really big when we were kind of coming up on YouTube. I think a lot of people in the current generation would have said, oh, go watch Mr. Beast Squid Game, you know? Like, what is it about looking back at past iterations of YouTube?
It's just a good representation that I'm getting old. You know how when you're in your teens, and even probably early 20s, there is like that nostalgic period. Like this is when you're discovering creativity, this is when you're discovering art. And so what you were given at that time, that's what stays with you the most, because that's what you were able to ingest the best. And I think that is just a generational thing. And so there is going to be periods when in 5-10 years time, and people are going to be like, people will look at the Mr. Beast era, which is what we're in now, be like, wow, that was such an incredible time. But I'm still optimistic that Mr. Beast will still be the top dog at that time in the next time period as well. But I think it's just because of where I was and my age at the time, that for me was the golden era. But then there's this current generation who are experiencing their golden era, and that's okay.
I do want to clarify something. How long have you been on YouTube?
I signed up to YouTube when it was a dating website.
When it was a dating website.
That was his original intent.
We are dating.
Yeah.
And we did meet because of YouTube.
And so it ended up working
So
out.
it did work out for this very specific situation. You know what? High five to that. So you've been on YouTube since it was a dating site. So how old were you?
I think I was 12 to 13 years old.
Making films with your friends.
Yeah.
In your backyard.
It literally started with a flip phone. I made a video of throwing a Dalek at a TARDIS. If you don't know what that is, look up Doctor Who. Showed it to my friends. They all thought that was really funny. I went, oh, this is kind of fun. I want to do more of these. And then it just snowballed, and it leading literally to this moment.
That is so crazy that you started at 12 and now you're 28. That's over half of your life on YouTube.
And I think there's a high chance the rest of my life.
Your channel was dormant for some time because you were working on another channel. What was that channel?
The other channel I was working for has been Logan Paul.
Logan Paul.
Yeah.
I would be a bad interviewer if I did not ask about the Hayden-Hillier-Smith-Logan-Paul years. I think when a lot of people think about you, they think of you as this amazing editor and you were just born a good editor. But I think working on videos every day because you had to for the algorithm probably refined your skills in a way to where they got now. So I'd love if you could speak about your Logan Paul years, the amount of work, what you learned, how you started maybe from your first video and how you ended with your latest video that you did, which was the Pikachu Illustrator card.
When you look back at the entire history of me and Logan working together, which was over the course of 7 to potentially roughly 8 years, I think where we were when we started in 2017 to where we've now ended up in, I think, almost 23, is a really, really good testament to what experience means. You know how they always say that you can study all of this and you can really have a good understanding of the theory of filmmaking and whatnot, but if you're not really in the thick of it, there's a huge risk that you're not going to be able to execute what's actually going on in your mind. Me and Logan were doing both at the same time. We were expanding on the theory, expanding on the ideas, expanding on style, while also doing it. Bottom line, having to make a video every single day. And we did that for over a year and a half. It's important to look back at the first videos that me and Logan were doing. They are awful today. So bad. But you have to start somewhere. But then literally, if you watch those vlogs over time, you just see the quality get better and better and better and better and better and better and better. And I think it's because me and Logan never had the philosophy, and Logan taught me this, Logan never had a philosophy of settling. We would make something great, and Logan would go, do it better next time.
Right.
And that push and that philosophy, that will just like idea of we're never gonna max out was really important. We took like a decent break during 2018, just like restructuring, trying to really figure things out. And then once we then found what I call it the maturing year, we needed a good time to kind of figure out, okay, we can do this, but what do we actually want to do? And then we then spent a good year or two really trying to figure out what is it that we can give to the audiences that we also enjoy making. And then once we then changed that mindset, it then led to what we would call the quarantine vlogs. Logan in 2020 was posting, instead of 7 days a week, was posting 3 days a week, really condensed, efficient content that was highly entertaining for everyone to watch. We would not have been able to do that without the experience of the 2016 to 2018 vlogs. Bottom line was just, okay, you finished it, now do it again. Okay, you finished it, now do it again. Okay, you finished it, now do it again and again and again and again. And organically and naturally, you genuinely develop creative muscle memory.
Yeah.
It's like you experience this moment, you went, I know exactly what to do here. And instead of the long time figuring out how to do it, because you've had the experience, you can execute it straight away.
I've known you since before you worked with Logan. I've known you since you were in your final year of film school.
And wasn't my filmmaking terrible then?
Yes, I did see your final project for film school, and it was a choice. Would you ever roast your student films?
I do intend to. Here is where I started, and here's what I learned, and here's why this is a terrible movie, but I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah, and with that, would you ever roast some of the old Logan vlogs? Because I know you're quite known for like roasting ZHC, roasting Beam. Would you just roast yourself? I'm sure people could be like, oh my gosh, even he has mistakes, you know?
Well, I think it'd be hypocritical if I didn't. I definitely do need to like reflect onto what I was doing at the time. That I want to reflect on videos that I thought were like a masterpiece at the time. And I'm gonna look back at them now, I mean, oh God, Hayden, what the hell were you thinking?
You learn so much not only as a filmmaker, but as a person. And you've grown up so much just as an editor from age 12 to age 28. Of course you have. Speaking of which, I do want to ask you, what is your first memory of editing and what NLE was it?
So the first video I ever made was throwing the Dalek at the TARDIS.
And was that edited?
No, that was just the one shot on the camera. Straight into the camera.
Okay.
And then I think that's when I then discovered Windows Movie Maker.
Oh, I remember her well.
What a fantastic tool that was.
Are we really gonna say on record Windows Movie Maker was fantastic?
We're allowed to look through it through nostalgic glasses.
Oh my God.
So if we look at it now, no, yeah.
That was my first NLE as well. It froze. It had dead pixels. It had glitches.
Yep.
If you put too much footage in it, it would just die. Yep. Honestly, so awful. And I dreamed of the day I could afford a Mac so I could do iMovie because all my favorite YouTubers had iMovie. And ironically, I never had an iMovie phase. I did Sony Vegas. And I think you did Sony Vegas as well.
Yeah.
Tell me about your first experience opening Windows Movie Maker and what were you cutting?
This video has been lost to the sands of time. I have looked for it for years and I've never found it. But it was inspired by another creator called Dominic Farah who did a series called The Billy Goat Cooler. And it was about a prank caller. And I went, oh my God, this is so fun. I want to make my own version. And it's me with a webcam doing my own silly voice of literally prank calling myself.
Prank calling yourself.
So I acted out me being pranked called on a webcam and like acting all goofy about it and then dubbing it in with like a silly voice, me trying to do a Pikachu impersonation. I am not doing it now. But a Pikachu impersonation of like trying to be the prank caller.
Pikachu, like that?
Worse. But also speaking English in a Pikachu voice.
No, that's just not a Pikachu voice. Come on, You were the biggest Pokemon?
Pokemon?
The biggest Pokemon fan ever, Logan Paul.
Pokemon, yeah. I think that was, the first video I ever edited. And that, I think, in terms of, and then that was it, the floodgates were open. And I think, that was where it all began. And it's been a mistake ever since.
What about that moment, doing that silly Pikachu voice in that video? What about that really got your gears going?
I made it. I made this. And I was like, oh, I made this. There was an interesting sense of ownership and something for me that I made that I wanted to share to as many people as I could. I don't think I realized it then. Like, I don't think you would when you're 12 or 13 years old. But there was just something that I went, this is really fun to do. And I could not stop since.
Wow, and that just kicked off your whole career.
It's also definitely worth mentioning. I think I had I was fortunate enough to have a father who identified that I was having fun with this. And so he began supporting it a lot. And so that Christmas, he gave me a DV camera. Every time I was getting better, he was gifting me better cameras like every single Christmas. And so it was like an annual thing that I was able to up my production quality every year. No way would a 15-year-old be able to afford a Canon 550D. He noticed that I was, as a young teenager, slightly troubled teenager, I was like, I want to encourage this. So even my dad was encouraging me a lot on this. And so I think I'm also very grateful for him to be part of one of the main reasons why I'm on this journey.
That is so important, having someone who believes in you. To viewers at home that maybe don't have someone that believes in them, what would you like to say to them?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have someone who did believe in me, but it doesn't mean that you can't believe in yourself.
And I truly think that we here at the Editing Podcast, we definitely believe in you. We have such an amazing community of editors and content creators. Come say hi on Twitter or in the comments. It's such a great place to be, honestly, truly. I love this community, and there are people on the internet that will believe in you.
I'm so grateful for it. And I think there was an interesting realization I had today. We recorded another episode earlier where I interviewed another traditional TV editor. And he asked me a really, really interesting question where he said, when I've been coming up on television, I was entering the building and I was meeting people who are in their 50s and 60s and even 70s who have been editing their entire lives. Yeah. And they were my mentor, and they were the ones who were able to teach me how to cut television. And he's had a really good experience growing up alongside them and seeing them come and go, and then also seeing the next generation coming in, and then him also then being able to start teaching them. I would consider me and the people who are around my age the first generation web creators. Where it's like we were the ones who really solidified this as a career. We're the ones who really solidified this as an industry. But then us being the first people means there isn't really anyone that I can look up to and see where this path is going.
Yeah.
And that is exciting and also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, we see how admittedly fragile these web careers can be.
Absolutely.
And so there is no anticipation of where or what how this can go. Again, that's exciting and also terrifying.
I have this thought often that if Vine can go, any of them can go. YouTube can go, TikTok can go, and there will be all these creators that have lost their distribution platform, essentially. It would be like if Netflix just canceled all of their shows and died, Like, that would be a huge hit to the entertainment industry. But that did happen with Vine. Is that something you ever think about? Like, is there life after YouTube should something happen to it?
What it is, it's making me come to realize the risk of putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
2 years ago, I thought YouTube was immortalized. Oh, there's nothing that can beat it. And now I'm looking at these TikTok creators going, oh, I'm fucked. It's in seeing what they are doing at their age. They're doing quality that is pretty much matching me and better. And they're doing it at 18 years old, and it took me 28 years to get to that quality because they can learn so much faster than us now.
Is part of it the education, or is part of it that editing software is so much better? Like, we started on Windows Movie Maker, which was like trying to edit on a potato.
Yeah.
And they're starting on the latest version of iMovie and Final Cut and Premiere, and it's just already lightning faster than where we began.
They have chips on their iPhone that can do multi-level editing right on their phones.
Yeah.
And so I think it comes back to the accessibility. I
Yeah.
always like to talk about I was one of the first generations who had accessible cameras to start making content. It was those SD cameras and those webcams. That was brand new at the time. I was limited to the technology. And there is this thing where if you film a webcam and it looks shit, it kind of compels you naturally to kind of make it a bit shit because you've been limited by that perspective that you can't do any better. So, and then as soon as you get a new camera and you figure out how to make it work, suddenly your perspective shifts.
Yeah.
And you're able to think bigger suddenly. And I've had that every single time we've upgraded a camera. Every single time I've gotten a more powerful computer to edit in, my perspective, my horizon is larger. This is how much more I can do. And so the limitations of technology had made me very limited in my creativity. But now the TikTok generation that is expanded instantly.
Yeah.
What they can think straight away, just by the quality that the technology can give to them straight away, means they don't have to take 5-10 years to get to a good point. They can get it in the first week.
I'm very envious of people who started with iPhone 14 and not a BlackBerry. You can't edit on a BlackBerry, okay? I'm very jealous of people that start with Final Cut and not Windows Movie Maker. You guys, I don't think the teens know the struggle that the previous YouTube generation did.
It's a loop. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Because honestly, there's people watching this and they're going, well, I remember reading the Avid manual and there wasn't any tutorials because it was all a hard copy. Like
we literally have a book by Walter Murch in the blink of an eye that is him talking about the first ever time he cut on a digital NLE software. And it's a fascinating experience of like the way he had to retrain his mind to make it work and how much he fell in love with it as well. Whereas for us, it was like, that's all we know.
Anyone who is an editor has read this book, loves this book. It is the editing Bible. There's a part of this book that really, I think, encapsulates conversations that you have on this show. Page 16 of In the Blink of an Eye, the chapter called Most with the Least. An overactive editor who changes shots too frequently is like a tour guide who can't stop pointing things out. And up there we have the Sistine ceiling, and over here we have the Mona Lisa, and by the way, look at those floor tiles. If you are on a tour, you do want the guide to point things out for you, of course, but some of the time, you just want to walk around and see what you see. If the guide, that is to say, the editor, doesn't have the confidence to let people themselves occasionally choose what they want to look at or leave things to their imagination, then he is pursuing a goal, complete control, that in the end is self-defeating. Mm-hmm. People will eventually feel constrained and then resentful from the constant pressure of his hand on the backs of their necks.
I think the way he describes it is just, it's forceful.
Yeah.
It's if you are being thrown around everywhere, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this, while on a tour, you don't get that moment to actually appreciate what it is that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Because the tour guide's already dragging you away. An editor has that risk, and it's a very easy mistake to make. And I'm thinking, because of the viewing habits that we have with web media, with the frictionless to leave, has generated massive insecurity for a lot of creators. Please don't leave, please don't leave, please don't leave. But then a good tour guide is, hey, look at this. This is the history behind it. Let's give you a moment to ingest this. And then he steps back. And then you look at this tapestry, you look at this, or like this floor tiling in this historical building, and you went, oh, wow, this has a lot of stories behind it.
Yeah.
But then after you kind of process the majority of it, the tour guide then comes back and is like, hey, let me move you on to the next thing. And there's this elegant dance with it. With that also gives confidence.
Yes.
And I think that's and so it is letting the tour guide has the confidence that you will be able to enjoy that moment for yourself.
Yes.
And what that also means is actually coming back to trusting the audience.
Yeah.
That tour guide who's confident can say, hey, here is some information, and I trust you to interpret it the way that feels best for you. You let them have that moment, and then you gently lead them on to the next moment. That gentle movement, rather than grabbing them by the head or grabbing them by the back of the neck and pushing them around, gives the audience or the people on that tour a much more pleasant experience.
Well, the reason I bring it up is that I feel like for some genres of YouTube, the editor is got their hand on my neck and it's like, look over here, no, look over here, no, look over here, no, look over here. And I can't process it. Maybe I'm just so fucking old, Hayden. Maybe I'm a literal 30-year-old watching YouTube
Maybe
nowadays.
we're just tired.
I do want them to have the confidence to say, hey, sit down, we're in Paris. Take it in. You know, an idiot's not gonna leave Paris. If you give them Paris, they'll stay.
Give them Paris.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be the style, or maybe that's the prompt. Give them Paris.
The French also popularized jump cuts,
Oh, yeah.
I learned recently. So you really want to give them Paris.
So basically, we need a French New Wave.
French New Wave on
runner.
YouTube. I think a lot of people watching this want to know how to be the next Hayden-Hillier-Smith. What are some of the hallmarks of your editing style that they can apply on their next edit?
Every time someone's asked me that, I give a different response. Because if I'm honest, I still feel like I'm still trying to understand what exactly is my editing style.
Oh, really? I can tell you.
Okay.
I can tell you what a Hayden-Hillier-Smith cut is, in my perspective, as someone that's known you for 8 years.
All right, hit
and
me.
it's taken a while to get to this kind of signature, but to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, to me, this is a Hayden-Hillier-Smith edit.
Hit me.
It will have at some point orchestral music.
Yep.
A Hayden-Hillier-Smith edit has a very interesting way of telling jokes that's very, very British. And you tell the joke through editing, and you almost do an anti-joke.
I think there's British humor.
Yeah,
in my
I don't know
editing.
how quite to describe it because I'm not British.
But the thing is, I don't even think the British can describe our humor. We just know it.
A very anti-humor, less is more kind of joke telling. That's very, very clever, to be honest. You kind of have to not do the obvious joke to tell a Hayden-Hillier-Smith joke.
Well, in that case, I'll probably interpret it as extreme. It's building up to the extreme, so you can then aggressively whiplash to the other extreme.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably part of my style. I like to ping pong. I like to whiplash.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you like also juxtaposition.
Yeah.
So if someone is acting like they're on Jackass,
Yep.
you're putting Beethoven on top of them.
Yes.
If someone is going through the dark night of the soul, you might put weird clown music over them to make fun of them. You're not afraid to make fun of your subject. Again, that goes back to the whole YouTube's editing style is we know there's an editor and the editor is a character and the editor can make fun of you. And it's fun when the editor makes fun of you.
Yeah.
I think that's actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, I think that's a piece that I think newer creators are missing when they have this dream of becoming an influencer and they start editing and they hire an editor. They don't let the editor make fun of them because they want to be so cool and so popular and flash their cool clothes. And, you know, I'm probably generalizing here, but a big piece to getting your editing style right is the subject has to be secure enough for the editor to tease them.
The comparison that I always make is there was an instance when Jake Paul and Logan Paul were filming the exact same content.
Yeah.
And it was them just doing just a silly stunt. Jake Paul and his editor put on hip-hop trap music of them going up the ramp and doing it, and it goes into slow motion, and it's like, and they're throwing a lens flare, and it's fucking cool. And then they land, like, yeah, like, dudes, that was cool, bro. Whereas when Logan gave me that footage, I put in classical music. They go into the air and it's like Ave Maria in slow motion. and it's like, it's like, it feels like there's like angels like singing towards them in slow motion. And so there's an element of comedy to an extent in making fun of it. It's like, this is a very underwhelming stunt, so I'm going to make this the most overly dramatic thing possible in a very stylistic way. It is that self-awareness and it is that simply having fun. But I think that's a relatively unique style that I had that I feel like has had an influence with other editors. That 'cause I do see that.
Creators are letting that meta editing style, like
And
the
I love
editor
that.
being a character, it is happening.
Yeah.
But not everyone quite gets it. And they think, well, I'll just put some orchestral music on and
They're trying.
That's it.
Do you think that I was able to execute it the first time?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I honestly, I know you weren't because
Yeah.
I remember when you first got hired. I remember your first student film. I've seen you grow up. Going back to your editing style, so we've got orchestral music at some point, juxtaposition,
Yeah.
British humor.
Yeah.
The editor is a character, and the editor can tease you.
Yeah.
And what else is in your style?
One of the first things I ever got when I was discovering film was how much of a better experience you get when you spend more time on the sound
Oh yes.
than you do the visuals. If you were to, and I've been improving on it this year, and I've actually gotten pretty good at it, but I never knew how to do After Effects. I never knew how to do graphics or some really like interesting visuals. I instead went into how can I adjust this track to get the point I want? How can I bring in this style of sound effect to make this type of point? How can I use a music swell or a pacing or even a change of song to emphasize a point? Or
Yeah.
even making a song end to prove a point. That was where I swang in terms of my development, whereas I think a lot of creators discovered After Effects because that's a visual thing and that's like exciting.
Yeah.
Whereas like visually, my priorities in terms of enjoyment was like, how can I make it feel good here? The best example I always have is with Logan Paul buying Pokemon cards. In the grand scheme of the world, that's not important. Whereas for me, it's like, in Logan's perspective, in Logan's world, this is the most important thing ever for him. And this is him trading millions and millions of dollars to collect these cards. And so this to him is his elite high society moment.
Yeah.
And once I came to that realization, I went, okay, so I need to make this feel like an elite high society experience.
Yeah.
And so part of that is the association with obviously shows like Downton Abbey,
Yeah.
The Queen's Gambit, even Bridgerton.
Yes.
There is this classic style with the music choices that they have that are appropriate for that time period. And we associate elite high society in our culture with that style of music. So I went, all right, fuck it. I'm going to bring that music to Logan. It's Pokemon cards, but I took it really seriously. And I did that with the music choices that I make to make this the most important experience for Logan.
Yeah.
And that style was created not from the visuals or anything like that, but because of the feeling that I created with simply my music choices.
I have had the privilege of seeing you work with music and hearing you. We live together, so I hear every little on the timeline. But the way you work with music is so specific, and it reminds me of some of the first advice I got when I thought I wanted to be an editor in a past life. I thought I wanted to be an editor. And turns out I'm a better actor, writer, producer, and I can edit a little bit, but I'm not like you. I'm not like Jordan. I'm not like any of the guests we've had on the show. I might be editing a little bit of this episode, so hi, future Ashley. But I am not an editor. But in my past life, I thought I did want to be an editor. And the advice I got was, if you want to be good at this, learn how to edit music.
Yeah.
Half of your job, probably more than half of your job, is just editing music. Where in the song can you truncate it so it still sounds like the song, but it's shorter? Or trying to find, okay, where is that sting in the song that can kind of transition me out? And I see that when I see you work on music in your edits. You are constantly chopping and changing things around. You're adding stuff from one track and stitching it to another, or you're taking the verse and you're putting it all the way over here at the crescendo. You have such a good eye for it where you can look at the waveforms and be like, that's the chorus.
Yep.
And that's the crescendo. You just have this automatic thing, and I'm sure it comes from time and practice, but your eye for it, as well as your ear for it, is so good. How did you develop that? Is it just practice?
I didn't realize I was doing that until you pointed it out the other month. I didn't realize that. Part of my education was I did study music as well for my GCSEs and I think a little bit of A-levels as well. And so I think I learned like the foundations, and then part of it was also my brother was a drummer.
Yes.
And I think that organically taught me rhythm as well, because drums are bloody loud, and so the whole neighborhood can hear it. But if you're in the other room, of course you can hear it a lot louder. So I was taught rhythm organically because of that environment.
We have on here
Yes.
a prop.
Okay.
I haven't asked about this yet. What does this say on here?
This is my sound effects library.
How many dollars worth of sounds are on that?
I think I have been collecting sound effects and buying sound effects over the course of my, I have to say 8 years of doing this professionally. But I would say the value of this hard drive over the course of everything I've bought is probably worth $30,000 to maybe even $40,000.
$40,000?
It's mine.
So if anyone in my family is wondering why I don't have a ring, it's this hard drive right here. This is 40 grand's worth of sound effects that you've collected from various websites, one website.
Well, I would tell you what websites they are, but I'm not sponsoring this episode.
So good. You just collect them.
Yes.
And you pick and pull from all different websites, all different libraries.
Yeah.
I know that when this is plugged into your computer, shit is going down. Like, this is a very special hard drive in our household. If this is lost, it's a whole thing. We have to find this.
Yeah.
Is this backed up?
No.
Any hard drive companies that want to sponsor us, come send us your hard drive. You need some backup. His 40 grand sound library.
I've
Jesus
never even
Christ.
thought of it that way. I'm going to do that immediately after this recording.
So, okay, so it's 40 grand's worth of sounds. How many sounds are in here?
Hundreds of thousands. at this
Hundreds of
point.
thousands.
Yes.
Hundreds of thousands.
And I think just because of over the years of me collecting it, I know exactly what sound effect I'm looking for. Or at least I know what
Wow.
folder. I want this type of sound effect. Here's this folder that I've collected. Off I go. I go through that. 200 to 300 sound effects of that specific sound, and off I go.
You plug this one in.
Yeah.
And what are you looking for?
So there's a sequence I did recently where there was multiple TVs turning on over a short sequence. And that's quite an exciting thing to watch on its own. But I didn't feel like it had that impact that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I wanted each TV to turn on with this impactful sound effect. And now, normally, the first thing that you would look at is TV static turn on, because these are all like retro TVs. I tried that. I bought it off a couple sites that I have subscriptions on, but they weren't quite hitting me. Like, a lot of those sites seem to have relatively generic styles. Whereas in my library, I had neon gun reloads. They're like sci-fi gun reloads. And so
Okay.
let's just say there's like some sci-fi movie set in space, and it's like some laser or lightsaber or whatever. It's like choo 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 choo, and as it has that sort of like jittery like sort of sound effects as if it's reloading. And I went, fuck it. All right, I'm gonna see what it sounds like when I put it underneath a TV. And I layered it all up, and it sounded phenomenal. It was just such a really, really great style in terms of making, I think, the images that I presented a lot more powerful because of
Yeah.
that. But I prioritized the neon reload sound effects to make what is a vintage shot feel also futuristic and powerful.
Wow.
So that's part of like the contrast. Like, I like to go for the two extremes. Here's something vintage, but I made it sound sci-fi.
It's so out of the box. And I think that is like a classic hallmark of sound design is you never would guess what that sound actually is. Like, apparently Bones of Celery is like the classic one.
My favorite example that blew my mind is whenever you hear rain on film, it's actually just bacon sizzling.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I love that.
What it is for me is feeling is the biggest priority in editing and in storytelling. And when you're working on an edit and you realize this doesn't have the feeling that I want it to do, it's depending on the editor and what you choose to prioritize to try to get that feeling. It's very common and definitely is one of the steps of like, okay, the feeling is not right. Let me adjust the colors. Let me change the exposure a little bit. Let me maybe try to adjust this frame and whatnot. Whereas for me, it's like, okay, this does not have the feeling that I want. The first thing I do is the music.
Yeah.
That is the first thing, because I think sound is the biggest and most powerful communicator to tell you how you're supposed to feel.
You lay down, what, V1?
Yeah.
What V does music come in? V2, V3?
So I think V1, so V1 is I get the assembly, just like, okay, all selects, like, okay, this is what I want to work with. And then V2, I go through and like, okay, here's the things I really want to work with. V3, I kind of start getting those things down a little bit. And then once I have an idea of the feeling that the footage is giving me, oh, okay, so that's the feeling I want. Let me find a track that suits it.
Yes. So
And-
that's like what, 5?
That's probably like V4 or V5.
Wow.
Yes. So once I get the story down, this is what I want it to be, and then I let that story tell me how this feels.
And the feeling is
Yeah.
the music.
Yeah. It's the feeling is like, so in this case, go back to Logan, and so I'm going for Logan, and I was like, okay, Pokemon, the millions of dollars. This is him really enjoying the fact that he is a multimillionaire now. He's now joined the elite. This is part of high society. Oh, high society, Downton Abbey. Off I go.
Interesting.
It's like I begin to make associations, and then I start going down that rabbit hole. And then once I then have that feeling, that vibe, that we always like to say it, I prioritize creating feeling by the cuts, by just trying to keep it as simple as possible, and then supporting it with the music.
How much of it too is that we wouldn't expect a jock like Logan to watch Downton Abbey? Is that part of the fun too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the contrast.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even think he knows what Downton Abbey is. I don't think he's watched The Queen's Gambit. You know.
I would love for Logan to come over and watch Downton Abbey with us. Let's fucking go.
Yeah. I honestly would love to have an interview with him. Like me and him sit across the table and have a chat.
So we talked a bit about your editing style.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your inspirations. Let's say you have a trainee editor. They're coming in. They're going to help assist you on some edits. What 3 films would you give them to watch as homework so they could understand your favorite editing and your editing style?
1, Hot Fuzz. That was the movie that made me absolutely fall in love with style in editing.
Yeah.
The movie was, in my opinion, made via the editing style because of that movie. 2, I think Snatch by Guy Ritchie. Guy Ritchie is a really, really great dialogue editor.
Yeah.
And he's really, really great in using dialogue to then visually storytell, like using it for motivated cuts and whatnot. I think the 3rd film, in terms of vibes and feeling, and also just beautiful storytelling and cinematography, I think was also American Beauty.
Yeah, that is your favorite. That's been your favorite since I've known you.
The inspiration that film gave me in terms of the style and the feeling.
Cinematography is so good in that.
Yeah. And I think also the music of Thomas Newman in that movie.
Yes.
I think once I realized how much feeling that can be generated, like there was like dream sequences in that, and it made this incredible style because of also the music choices that Thomas Newman made.
Yeah.
And so like there's an element in all of those movies. So Edgar Wright taught me stylistic editing and like how you can use
Edgar Wright of Hot Fuzz, to clarify.
Edgar Wright of Hot Fuzz.
Yeah.
You taught me that you can make jokes via editing. Guy Ritchie and with like movies like Snatch taught me that you can use dialogue to also motivate cuts as well.
Yeah.
And then Sam Mendes with American Beauty also taught me a really beautiful element of style, of also pacing and also just feeling as well. Like that movie just feels beautiful to watch.
Yeah. In 2023, the long-awaited HillierSmith editing course will be released. I know this because I co-wrote it. I am so excited for this to come out.
It's currently being edited, yes.
It's currently being edited. Shout out Nas Academy editors. In this course, there is what you call the editing triangle.
Yeah.
And one of the points of the triangle is emotion.
Yeah.
I would love if you could talk about emotional availability as an editor. How do you do that? What does that mean? And in our world where we're so emotionally closed off, how do you open yourself to empathize with the characters you're editing?
So here's my discovery of this and what this led me down. So there was a period in my life that was a relatively dark moment. And I then had the opportunity to edit content that was related towards that experience. And while I was editing that, I started making choices based on how I felt. Like this felt like the expression that I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, this is kind of interesting. Let me code more of this. And I then started putting more and more and more of the traumatic experience that I had in terms of and then trying to find ways to express that in the editing. And for me, it's still one of the best things I've ever made.
Yeah.
With that discovery made me realize that a lot of really, really good editing and a lot of really, really good storytelling does not come from here.
Yeah.
It really does come from the heart. How does your body and heart feel when you see that cut? Not what you think, what you feel.
Yeah.
And I have been going down that rabbit hole ever since of what does it mean for your heart? Part of my research and part of my experiences and trying to understand that more made me realize that the best edits do express that. And in terms of bottom line, the viewer and the editor having making themselves emotionally vulnerable and emotionally available to be able to feel what's happening in their body and then bringing it onto that edit. And that's a very, very tough and very challenging place to get to in terms of those choices.
Yeah.
And so something might seem logical in here, but if you're not getting an emotional response, in my opinion, that cut doesn't work then.
Interesting.
And so part of it is then a learning emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And everyone has their own journey of understanding emotional intelligence. My understanding of emotional intelligence is going to be different to someone else. And so I want to invite other people to discover what emotional intelligence means for them. The watered down version of, okay, this is a happy scene. Okay, how does happy feel? How can I make that feeling and translate that onto screen? That's probably, or, okay, this is sad. Okay, so what can I do to make that feeling of sad? It isn't just throwing a track underneath and making the colors blue. That's not enough. You really do have to ensure that you are hitting that emotional reaction. And a lot of it also does come down to your own emotional availability and bottom line, emotional maturity.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been able to do those emotional expressions at 20 years old. It was around 24, 25 that I then began to have emotional maturity for me to then be able to express that in the films and the editing that I did. And so the point of what I'm trying to say is this, and the reason why emotion for me is one of my biggest priorities in every cut that I make. In the same way that you would become emotionally available to your partner, or emotionally available to your parents, emotionally available to your family, emotionally available to your friends, that's a really, really hard part of the process, and it's a really tough transition to make. But then once you do, even for one person, your relationship with that person changes into something truly, truly beautiful. I think to an extent you have to have that same process with your video projects. You have to develop a personal relationship with what you're editing. And then part of that then becomes emotional available. And then part of it is then just the emotional intelligence to understand what it is you're feeling and how you can express that. Once you hit those points, your edit becomes beautifully obvious.
What I'm hearing is you have to let the footage affect you.
Yeah.
So if your character gets kicked in the face, you should feel that pain as the editor.
Yeah.
If your character gets proposed to, you should feel that joy as an editor.
Yeah.
The footage should be affecting you. And then you say to yourself, okay, how do I yes and this with all the little choices I have to do?
And then part of that is the process. So let's just say someone does get kicked in the face and you don't get an emotional response. You go, oh, I didn't get an emotional response there. Okay, that means I need to build on that moment until I get that emotional response. If you prioritize emotion and you're able to capture and showcase emotion well, it makes your content believable.